Hello and welcome to the Wine Educate podcast, where we explore WSET education, study tips, and practical advice for wine enthusiasts and professionals. I am your host, Joanne Close, and this is episode 16. So this is the second in our series of where we explore the structural components of wine. Last episode, we did acidity, and now we're going to do sweetness. So, the definition, according to the Oxford Companion to Wine, is sweetness in wine is derived from residual sugar, otherwise known as RS, left after fermentation. Your WSET textbook says sweetness is a perceptible level of sugar in a wine ranging from dry to lusciously sweet. All right. I felt your little eye roll there. I did. I sensed it because many of you have a disdain for sweetness. Like, well, I don't drink sweet wines. Well, and that's true because the majority of wines that we drink end up being dry or perceived to be dry. This is all a fashion thing. So things go in and out of fashion, and wine is not exempt to that. There were times where sweeter wines were definitely more in vogue, and now it tends to be more on the drier side people like to drink. Because of this is one of the hardest components to gauge, okay? It is certainly my weak spot. Gauging, is it off dry? Is it medium? It can be tricky, but just like everything, it's a practice thing, okay? So let us talk about some of the technical information. What is residual sugar? Residual sugar is the amount of sugar left in the wine after fermentation has been completed. If a wine is dry, it is 0 to 4 grams per liter. We're back doing grams per liter. We did that with acidity. We're doing the same thing with sugar levels. Now, just because we say a wine is dry, it doesn't mean that there is absolutely 0 residual sugar in it. And in reality, most wines are going to be, if they're quite dry, going to be 2 grams per liter. It's really hard pressed to find them if they're 1 grams per liter and certainly below that. For whatever reason that I'm not going into today, there is pretty common for there to be a little bit of residual sugar left in the wine after fermentation is complete. Perhaps the strain of yeast wasn't going to eat some of the types of sugars that were left, and so on and so forth. I'll just leave it there. That is a much more technical topic to delve into. So the majority of the wines are about 2 grams per liter or less. That is pretty dry. And how dry is that? So if we think of it in measuring terms, we've got our teaspoons and our tablespoons. If you have a 750 bottle of wine, which is like the most common, right? That is equivalent to 1/3 a teaspoon of sugar dissolved in that bottle. That is very small amount. I bet you there's more sugar in your hamburger bun than there is in your bottle of wine. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of one of my wine pet peeves is the trend for people marketing some wines as being wines for dieters. I saw a bottle of wine the other day had like a runner on, like someone in like a marathon running on a bottle of wine. It's very, very strange. Marketing these wines as being better for you than other wines. I haven't sort of done real detective work on this, but my general feeling is that these wines probably have the similar amounts of residual sugar as most other wines do, right? So if we're that low with just 1 or 2 grams per liter of sugar left in the wine, it's really not a lot. So you don't have to go out and buy your diet wine. Why don't you just buy a regular wine, okay? And examples of dry wines, many. Okay, many, many, many things out there that you see on the grocery shelf or in your bottle shop. Off dry. Okay, so off dry could be anywhere from 4 to 12 grams per liter. This is really tricky off dry because the perception of sweetness is not just a number that of grams per liter, but it's also how the wine is interacting with the other components in the wine. You can have a German Riesling that is really high in acidity and also has a pretty healthy amount of residual sugar. And because of all that acidity, that wine can still seem dry. So this is tricky, and I don't want you to despair. Don't despair, okay? This is just think of it as a fun game. And you think, oh, well, this feels dry to me. Be like, well, how high is that acidity? And you can kind of play around with these different components, okay? So examples of wines that could be off dry, maybe a Gewürztraminer from Alsace, maybe some inexpensive red wines. Some red wines have a healthy amount of residual sugar in it. It's just a palate thing, a perception palate thing. German Rieslings, of course, can run the gamut from all levels of residual sugar. Let's talk about champagne, though, because this is a fun one, and it kind of illustrates an interesting point. So when it comes time for, let's just call them the Grandmaster Blender. I don't know what they're called. Anyway, when it comes time for the person who's in charge of the dosage that's added into champagne, they will play around with it. So they have like a beaker, and they'll say, okay, what does it taste like if we add in dosage A? And what does it taste like if we add in dosage B? And so on and so forth. Like very small increments of increasing residual sugar in the dosage. And they're tasting it along the way until they find just the right amount of added residual sugar in the dosage, just enough to kind of bring out the fruitiness of the champagne, but you don't even really perceive it as sweet. So this little bit of residual sugar can when it's put in at exactly the right amount, really make or break the balance for something like a champagne. Medium sweet, that's between 12 and 45 grams per liter. Your book states this is when wines with a distinct presence of sugar, but which are generally not sweet enough to partner with most desserts. Well, we'll be the judge of that. Maybe they do, but with most desserts. Okay, so you've got like your chocolate pecan pie. You need something a little sweeter to match with that. Again, German Rieslings, Moscato d'Asti, and good old white Zinfandel, right? White Zinfandel, medium sweet. Okay, sweet is anything that's 45 grams per liter. And this is when wines where the presence of sugar has become the prominent feature of a wine. I really like that. I like the way that that is put because that is exactly how it feels. You have a wine that is sweet. One of the first things out of your mouth after you've recovered from the acidity and the sugar is sweet. I hear it all the time. This style of wine, these wines are often made by a method in which the sugars have been concentrated. So that would be botrytis. I will go into these sort of things in greater detail in other episodes. But botrytis is a way of really concentrating the grapes. Therefore, when you ferment the concentrated grapes, they have a lot of sugar left in them. Styles of wines made this way would be Sauternes, made in Bordeaux, and Tokaji Aszú, made in Hungary. Also, perhaps an ice wine, which is where healthy grapes freeze on the vine. And when they're pressed, the ice stays behind. So you're really just getting that concentrated sugars from the grapes. And then maybe when you add grape spirit to a fermenting wine, so port, right? Or you're adding a sweetening agent to a wine after it was fermented. This is really not allowed in many places, but it is a common practice in sherry, right? You add a sweetening agent to sherry. After the fact, will make it a sweet wine. Okay, I'm going to try to convince you to try more sweet wine. So here we go. One of the best collections of wines in the United States is in Florida, okay? It Burns Steakhouse. And if you have been to Burns Steakhouse, you know what I'm talking about. And we love to go. It's just in Tampa, so it's like a little Spirit flight from New Orleans, like an hour flight. Hotels are relatively inexpensive. You get a group of 8 people. 8 people is the best number for having a wine dinner, by the way, for sharing bottles and tasting many things. And it is a really fun night because the wine list is vast. But I am not there for the Bordeaux and the Burgundy. The list is awesome for that. I'm there for the wines that are in the nooks and crannies, okay? We went there with a group and we all got wines from our birth years. I found a really, really old Chateauneuf de Pop, and it was like $40. How fun is that to try something that's old like that? They have a dessert room at Burns Steakhouse. So if you make it up, stumble on up to the dessert room. And now is when you order the Sauternes. So you can get Sauternes from 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, and it's not going to break the bank. I promise you, especially when you're splitting it with 7 other people. And it is the most fun. And these wines are exquisite. And because of their high levels of sugar, and you better bet they're going to have high levels of acidity to go along with it, they can age for such a long time and develop such beautiful tertiary flavors. So don't shy away from these dessert wines. I want you all to experience them because they can be marvelous. Okay, last category. Now, I don't know how you guys feel. Sometimes my level 2 students feel a bit cheated because they thought, well, hang on. In level 2, you said that sweet was the highest. I get to level 3 and all of a sudden you introduce luscious. So luscious is sweeter than sweet. The definition of luscious: wines are notably more viscous, and the wine leaves the mouth and lips with a sticky, sweet sensation. These could be Rutherglen Muscats, Tokaji Essentia. So this is not the same as Tokaji Aszú. This is, really tons more sugar. The legal minimum for Tokaji Essentia is 450 grams per liter. Whoa, that is very sweet. So you all know I'm here in New Orleans, and as of this recording, Brennan's is serving a spoonful of Tokaji Essentia in a crystal spoon for, I think the price just went up, $70. Anyway, still really fun and a great opportunity for you all to try this. Do not take the spoon. I think at the last time I spoke to the Somm there, she said they were down to like 2. 2 crystal spoons. All right. And then we've got PX, or Pedro Ximénez sherries. I love it when we use the PX in class because then if there's a little left over, I just put it in my tea. Or you could put it over ice cream. It's that thick and syrupy. All right, so how are we perceiving sweetness on the palate? Well, sweetness adds richness and weight to the wine. It is detected on, they say the tip of the tongue. I think it's many other places in your mouth you can perceive sweetness. Now, I will say that sometimes alcohol can be confused for sweetness. It has that sort of texture to it. So that's another one of these things to pay attention to and make sure you kind of know your tells for alcohol. We'll go over that coming up. and separate it from the sweetness levels. All right, I will leave you with one last story and one try to convince you to try more wines that are off dry or sweet. So I did a tour of Bordeaux a few years back, and we were going to a chateau in Lupiac. Lupiac is one of the sweet appellations, kind of near Sauternes. And we were having lunch there. And in my mind, I was being a real pill about the whole thing. I thought, oh, we can have lunch and all these wines are sweet and I don't want to have sweet wines with my lunch. I was being kind of a brat about the whole thing, if I'm honest. Well, the vineyard owner made the most splendid lunch, and she obviously knows her target audience and knows people's hesitancies towards drinking sweeter wines, perhaps. She had the lunch catered, and it was a lot of umami flavors. And if you've done your food and wine pairing exercise, you'll remember that umami flavors make sweet wines seem less sweet. So at a certain point, like halfway through the lunch, I looked up and realized that I had finished all my wines, which ranged from off-dry to medium to sweet. And, well, lesson learned. So she paired these wines so beautifully with the food, and it has changed me. It changed my opinion. So I do hope you all will get a chance to experience something like that. Certainly, when you're having dessert, try a dessert wine because they are made to go together, right? Okay. Next week, we're going to tackle another component. Until then, if you have not yet subscribed to our newsletter, I recommend that you do. It is my number one way to stay in touch with you guys. The algorithm is frustrating, to put it in a PG term, okay? And the newsletter really is where I talk about new classes when they're posted, and the wine trips and things like that, okay? All right, everybody, thank you again for listening, and I look forward to talking to you all again next week. Have a wonderful week.